I've been reading Chuck Palahniuk's craft book Consider This recently, and I've pulled out some of the most interesting parts of it because I think they'll be useful for other writers. Some of them are general quotes and some of them are more like technique suggestions, but you'll see what I mean. The first thing is a simple quote from the start of the book that I think is worth bearing in mind. If you're dedicated to becoming an author, nothing I can say here will stop you, but if you're not, nothing I can say here will make you one. This quote stood out to me because I think all writers can take something different from it depending on what stage of the craft they're at and what they're trying to do and how it's going and what they hope to achieve. What I take from it is almost like a comfort really, because a successful writer is boiling things down to if you really want to do it, you'll do it. I think there's mileage in that for writers that don't necessarily know when or how or if success will ever come and are just keeping at it. Just pushing and pushing and pushing for something all the time isn't quite what I'm talking about either. It's not about banging your head against a wall over and over. It's about banging your head against a wall, realising that it hurts and trying a different wall instead, until eventually you figure out you should have put a helmet on at some point. The second part of that quote, when he says, "Nothing I can say will make you a writer," is well worth remembering too. It's so easy to get lost in writing advice, and I know that as much as any other writer, even though I give writing advice, that hopefully I make it clear that my advice is nothing more than my opinions and my experiences. I'm careful about giving that caveat, but a lot of places aren't. A lot of businesses seem to suck up new writers and kit them out with all manner of unnecessary rules and approaches and formulas before sending them off to basically still have to figure everything out on their own anyway. Writing advice can for sure be useful. It will help you in the same way that learning the highway code and passing your driving theory test will help you drive. It's great information to have. It's an advantage for you. But you can't directly use it to drive a car. At some point, all the theory has to take a backseat, pardon the pun, for you to actually spend some time driving. You have to learn about writing for sure, and you can do that through books like Palahniuk's here, but nothing he can say will make you a writer. I agree. You have to get behind the wheel and write, and only you can do that for yourself. So the question is, will you? If you're new here, I'm Kieran. I'm a writer and a freelance editor, and I love to help writers tell their stories and have fun doing it. So thanks for being here. Here's the next thing I wanted to highlight. It's another quote. Forget about being liked. Tastes change over time, public taste as well as personal taste. Your work might not be immediately celebrated, but if it remains lodged in someone's memory, you have a good chance of being embraced over time. This is a really important point about the nature of writing, I think, that unfortunately no writer really wants to hear. I remember when I first started writing and I saw advice about how long it might take me to establish myself if I ever did, and it really bothered me. It felt like writers that had managed that were almost punching down, but I don't think they are. They're trying to prepare us for what writing is really like because they've already gone through all of that. Sure, some people write one book, it somehow gets enormously popular and they're made for life, but it really doesn't happen much, and especially not these days. And even if it does, my question, as always, is what then? If you strike success just like that, are you just finished? Will the itch to write be gone? Will you no longer have anything you want to say about the world? Will you stop telling stories? Probably not, right? So it's worth trying to get yourself comfortable early on and setting yourself up for the long haul, expecting to be honing your craft and working hard for a long time. A flash in the pan is one thing, and it might feel great in the moment, but it's not going to feed you forever. And when I say feed you, I don't mean literally. I'm not talking about money here. I'm talking about the stuff that keeps you up or lets you sleep at night. For me personally, that stuff is helping other writers improve their skills in any way that I can. That feeds me and keeps me going and stops me getting depressed and miserable. If I just had a bunch of money right now, I would still do this because stuff like a massive potential payday isn't why I write. I don't write as a calculated business venture. Money is a possible end result, but either way, if that were to happen or not, I would still be here. So that's why I don't worry about the niche appeal that my writing seems to have, or so agents have always told me. I don't worry that my work falls awkwardly between genres or isn't quite on trend. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not trying to sell 1 million copies. My writing keeps me engaged in storytelling, something I know about and have experience in, so that I can continue being any kind of help at all to other writers. That's the long haul that I'm going for. So I'd ask yourself, what's the long haul for you? What's the plan beyond writing a really good book? Long series maybe? Something else? Something bigger? I'm not saying you need all the answers right now, but it's worth thinking about where you're going. And if your first book doesn't set the world on fire, take a moment. Feel a bit sad. It's natural, but this is not the end. It's far from it, and you're just getting started and you're in control. And that's really important, I think. Writing can be a bit like setting off a firework in some respects, I suppose. You can get a huge burst of energy and speed and momentum at any moment from an errant spark of success, but if you're not ready for it and set up to point into open sky, it might not go well. This next one is a bit more of a technique thing, but could be a game changer if it hasn't already occurred to you. Instead of writing about a character, write from within the character. This is a great bit of advice, and to elaborate a bit, he goes on to say that the way we describe the world in our story must describe the character's experience of the world. No two people ever experience the exact same room. The example he gives in the book is that a plumber enters a different room than a painter does. Looking at narration in this way is the key to immersion and building deep characters, I think. We can build character through dialogue, through their actions, through what they look like, but all of that is how they're seen from the outside, not how they see from the inside. Describing the world through your character's eyes and on their terms will bring a sense of who they are into your narration as well, I think. It'll make their mark on the world around them. One way that Palahniuk suggests we do this is by avoiding abstract measurements. He gives examples of saying no more 6 foot tall men. Instead we should say a man too tall to kiss, or a man her dad's size when he's kneeling in church. And there's loads more examples too of how we can frame the world through our characters. And once you start thinking about it, it's one of those things that really feels like it clicks. At another point in the book, he's talking about depicting time passing, talking about another technique entirely, but it still connects. He mentions how you don't have to say, the drive took an hour, or they drove 30 miles. Instead, you can frame that through how your character will experience it, and say something like, the drive took 2 albums of sad songs. Once you start positioning yourself to view the story this way, it brings more colour and more depth to your narration, I think. And though it would clearly work directly in first person, I think it'd be even more useful for third person. A lot of third person narration can lean towards the more clinical or more neutral side, which can be what you need sometimes, but also it can come across as a little detached and boring. I think I do this from time to time, but there's definitely boring old measurements and stuff in my writing that could have been something interesting instead, so I'm going to bear that in mind. Personally, I think a middle ground of the two would be the best spot to be in. That way, you're making sure you can accurately communicate something like a distance or a length of time to a reader so that they'll fundamentally follow what's happening. But then also, where things are a little more obvious and mundane, you could switch it out for something a bit more interesting. Did you know I have an editing service where you can send me your work and I'll both line edit and developmental edit it for you? It's all done through my website. Feel free to check it out. To read my work or get additional content and personalised answers to your writing questions and a lot more really, take a look at my Patreon. I'd love to have you. Links for both are below. Thanks. Let me know if you want to see a few more insights from this book. I'll gladly make another video if it's going to be useful. Thank you so much for watching as always, and happy writing.